How we've basically put a cap on how much happiness money can buy. Yes, that research that shows people don't get happier once they make more money than 75K. Does that pass the common sense test according to yours truly? We're gonna find out today. Hey, XenPuck here. Another day whose schedule is only dictated by me, and boy does that feel good. And I am so happy that by the time this clip posts, my wifey would finally join me on the early retirement train. Now, as I always say on the snapshots in time, just because we're retired doesn't mean that we're rich like rapper rich or whatever, but frankly, I'm totally fine with that, because what I am is rich enough for me. But what's rich enough for most? Fancy studies show that people stop becoming proportionally happier once they make past just 75K a year. Wow, amazing! That doesn't sound like too much, right? Certainly not too much to hope for. It's not even 100K. Awesome, right? I love goals that look achievable, right? Especially since we're talking about the general public, not just my lovely classroom of an audience. Because anyone who watches my videos, my good lord, you guys are clearly better off than the average Joe or Jane, right? Because you're interested in fire. So today I want to break down how to really look at that study that in its essence says money could only boost happiness up to a point, about 75K in annual servings. Beyond that figure, money has little impact. That's what the original study showed. We'll see whether I agree or whether it needs amendment at this point, and how it affects the mentality of anyone who wants to reach early retirement, right? Anyway, if you're intrigued by what I might say, please subscribe, like, comment, share, and all that social media buzzwords, or whatever, because I'm rich enough for me and will be great regardless. First, I want to address, why is 75K the limit? Does that still hold today, right? So, let's talk about why that number is likely is only 75K, right? Because when you think about what the median household income in the US is, when that study was done, it was about 61K. So 75K is just a hair over 20% over what the vast majority of the middle class make in this country, right? And that makes sense, because if you ask someone or anyone how much they want to make, they always say just a little bit more, about 20% more than what they currently make. So the fact that the average of no more happiness increase ended up at 75K passes that common sense test, right? Because most entire households only make 61K. A bit more than that is what would make them happy. That means the vast majority of Americans can live a regular life at 61K. With that extra 20%, that's gonna make that difference, right? Of course, the study was done in 2010. At this point, I think the median household income has reached closer to 70K. So the amount that would probably make the vast majority of Americans happier in the most efficient manner would absolutely increase as well, right? That's just how income inflation works, right? 75K is not some golden number, in stone that's gonna continue to be 75. It has to take inflation into account. So right off the bat, do not stick to any specific number. What you should get out of that 75K number is simply take that median income and multiplies it by 1.2 or 1.25, right? So at this point in 2023, I'm gonna reasonably assume 88K is around 85 to 88K is around when most people's additional happiness would probably need to come from other sources than a straight up raise. Now, point number 2, right? So my wifey and I were actually debating the validity of having this sort of income ceiling at 75 or 88K, however you want to talk about it, right? And the idea that more money after that won't make you happier. So the mentor exercise my wifey proposed was simply this. Imagine yourself with 100K, right, in the bank, or $1 million in the bank, or 10 million in the bank. Would that really make zero difference, right? I get her general explicit point and agree with it, which is that it absolutely would make a huge difference to most people, whether they had 5 or 6 or 7 zeros behind their net worth, right? We are talking about net worth here, right? I can't imagine any millionaires actually keeping all their money in cash or even in a checking account, right? So if you think rich people actually have that much cash, please go back to listening to Dave Ramsey's advice instead of mine, because that would imply that you're not at the advanced level of personal finance yet. Okay, tangent over. Back to the scenario of having 10 or 100x what a normal person might have in the bank, right? Well, I think it will make a difference in to most people's mentality, right? It's not quite a difference in happiness, okay? Having, let's say, a million, the middle number, right? A million or more simply buys more security and flexibility. Both of these things can translate into happiness, but it's not exactly happiness right off the bat, okay? Besides, let's just be real here. Most normal average Americans will only see a figure above 100K in their accounts by the time that they're actual seniors, right? Much less a mil or 10 mil. So even this hypothetical is limited to the incredibly bougie subsegment of the total population. So yes, more money would probably guarantee some additional security, but it's not a scenario that's relevant to the blue collar or even the average white collar workers of the first world, right? So let's just call this a neutral point. More money could indirectly make one happier still, but it's not really relevant to most people's situations, okay? So my last point, so how should I interpret this whole red line of, over whatever arbitrary amount, happiness depends on other things than money, to this whole statement, right? The reality is that most people simply compare ourselves to peers. So as long as you're doing a little bit better than your average, that's where happiness tends to plateau, right? For people interested in FIRE though, I'd say the most important thing is a change in your own mentality, right? By stop comparing yourself to your peers, the faster you can do that, the easier it is to let go of that whole regular gig, right? Because to me, what really brings happiness is complete flexibility. Of course, I know this is much easier said than done. Even personally, I'm not perfect. I bought myself a yellow Porsche at some point in my life, thinking that a cool car will make me cool. Okay, it did not. I was as dorky then as I am now. It did take me a few years of extremely expensive German car repair ownership to teach me that, right? But since then, I've been on the red trajectory, right? I realized that I'm just not that complicated of a dude, right? The things that really make me happy, like human connections, do not require a lot of resources to accomplish. And my own sustainability costs are even less, right? So why would I strive to just make more and more money? For what? To always think that someone who makes yet a little bit more has it better or easier? Yeah, no, that's definitely not how life works. Right? I've met people who make marginally more money than me. They're not happier than me. They're absolutely not. Okay, never have I met a person like that. Okay, in fact, I would argue there are some people who make less money that are happier. Okay, yeah. So, in conclusion, can you be happier if you make more than 75K and its inflation-adjusted equivalent? Absolutely. But the rate of increase is likely to decrease, right? Money doesn't ever really make people happier, right? But it does help to build a floor that we can fall back on, and frankly, the more money one has, the softer the fall from whatever life throws at you. I mean, in the end, if you look at the extreme examples with nepotism babies or trust fund kids, they've got the bounciest cushion to fall back on that their parents gave them, right? And if the cushion is gigantic enough, right, like for the Bushes of the world or the Trumps of the world, even complete wastes of spaces in the world, can end up with supposedly the most important job in the free world. So if that's not a sign that a world is not a fair place, I'm not really sure what is, right? But hey, that doesn't bother me because I refuse to play that standard basic game, right? Just opt out and use money as a tool in your own search for real happiness, right? And that means flexibility, right? That means security. Instead of craving, a validation from other people, right? And you too can do it because, I can do it and I'm just some dum-dum, okay? Cheers. A la prochaine.